What is going on, everybody? And finally, welcome to Trans Am episode 5. I know it's been a while. I've been saying more Trans Am stuff is coming. Finally, this is the start of more content on this thing. I just ordered a bunch of parts to clean that interior up. So all you guys who kind of subscribed for the Tahoe content and me kind of cleaning stuff up and doing restoration kind of stuff, we're going to be really diving into that with this car. But today we're going to start by getting the back brakes fixed up. We're going to do a full rebuild on them. And while we're at it, we might even get around to flushing the swamp water out of the master cylinder. But enough of the introduction. It's been too long since we actually worked on this thing, so let's jump right into it. Now with the wheel and brake drum removed, you can just see how bad these brakes are. The wheel cylinder's leaking, the rubber looks like it's about to turn to dust, the shoes have seen better days. All in all, these brakes need one hell of a rebuild. Now we're going to only be working on the rear brakes today. The fronts are going to be an entirely different video. We might actually even upgrade them if we do not do a stock replacement. The reason I'm just focusing on the back is because they are metal to metal and somebody already replaced the front brake calipers and pads, so those have some time before we actually need to address them. So to pull these brakes apart, I'm using this brake drum kit I got from Harbor Freight. This thing was really cheap, and I'm going to put the link to the toolkit down in the description. It comes with all the tools you need to pull these brakes apart properly. Yeah, you could get away with just using needle nose pliers and vice grips and stuff, but this kit is cheap enough and it makes the job a whole lot easier, so I would definitely recommend going to pick this thing up. But with the brakes pretty much disassembled, the only thing left to do is come in here and remove the wheel cylinder. But before we do that, I'm just going to come in here with some Super Clean. I'm actually using the foamy stuff that Super Clean sent me to try out, and I'm going to spray down this backing plate, hit it with a wire brush, get it nice and clean, and then give it a good rinse off with some clean water. You can come in here with some brake cleaner and do the same thing, but I just like using a degreaser because not only does it work a little better and it kind of sticks to the dirt, but it doesn't blow all of that brake dust around and into the air as if you're going to come in here with some compressed, like a compressed can of brake cleaner or compressed shop air. Alright, so right there I just got the wheel cylinder removed, and this is held in by this one clip. There are no bolts holding this to the backing plate. This could be kind of frustrating getting this thing out, especially if it's original and it's never been removed before. But what I like to do is just come in here with maybe like a flathead, a pick, or even just 2 picks, and you could kind of get in there and spread the tabs apart, and usually it'll pop right out. As for putting it back in, that's a different story. It can be a little difficult. If you have a thin wall socket the same diameter as the clip, you could kind of get it over that and kind of evenly push it into place. You can see I'm trying to do that right here. Sometimes this doesn't work, so you're better off just kind of getting it started this way than coming in with the same kind of 2 screwdriver method and just evenly push on both sides of that tab. So now that we have the new wheel cylinder on, it's time to come in here and get ready to put the shoes on. I'm just using some brake grease on these 6 tabs. Now these are the points that the brake shoes actually rub against when the brake pedal is pressed. Doing this is going to cut down on any friction and any possible noise, because sometimes you'll actually get a squeak when you either hit the brake or pull up on the parking brake, and that's just because of the friction of the shoe rubbing against the backing plate. So I did pick up a new brake hardware kit, but it doesn't come with everything. There's a few pieces here you are going to have to reuse. Depending on the kit you get, you're going to have to reuse your star adjusters, you have to reuse this little rod that pushes the shoes apart when the parking brake's applied, as well as the little arm for the parking brake. But for the most part, all the springs and the retainers, they give you all that stuff new. So the brakes all assembled and adjusted, I just went and pulled the drum off to show you guys how the parking brake works. So you can see as you pull on the handle, that lever moves on the left, and that's what actually spreads the shoes apart to manually apply the brake. So with these old shoes off, let's take a closer look at them. You can see there's a hell of a lot of wear on one side and not that much on the other. These were wearing pretty unevenly, and actually the only spot where they were grinding was at that outer edge where the rivet was actually coming in contact with the inside of the drum. And just looking at all the rust on this thing, you could tell the parking brake was not working. You're going to run into that a lot with these cars, or really any old car with drum brakes, where the actual arm for the brake just gets seized up in the shoe. I also hit the new drums with some black caliper paint. This is just going to keep them looking good and prevent them from rusting over. So before we come in here and do the final adjustment on the drums, we're just going to replace this rear brake line. It's actually pretty rusty, and it's the only brake line on the whole car that has any significant amount of rust. So I went down to AutoZone and picked up this new kind of brake line that's very easy to bend. You don't need a bender. It's not copper, it looks like it, but it's very easy to work with, and I was happy with it. And I got the sizes that would kind of just fit where I didn't have to cut them, but regardless, I was going to have to cut the ends off and reflare them for my new wheel cylinders, because depending on what year your car is, there was like a crossover year where they changed from bubble flares to double flares, or it might be the other way around. Regardless, the wheel cylinders that I picked up did not match the fittings on the axle, but I really wasn't concerned about it because I knew I was replacing this brake line anyway, and regardless, the end was going to have to get reflared. Alright, so the brake line's all done. We are just about ready to start the bleeding, but before we do that, we're just going to come in here and get them all adjusted. So turning this little star wheel down here is either going to push the shoes further apart and closer to the inside of the drum, or retract them further away. Now these brakes are equipped with a self-adjuster. That's that arm that's kind of sitting right against the star wheel. This style in particular actually adjusts when you're reversing and hitting the brakes in reverse. So as you reverse and you hit the brake, that whole back shoe is kind of going to twist, therefore pull up on that arm, and that's actually going to turn that wheel and take up any slack. So the way you want to adjust these is just have them so the shoes just have some drag against the drum. You can listen here as you turn this, you kind of hear the shoes touching against the inside of the drum. I'm just going to tighten these up a little bit more, pop the drum back on, give it one more spin, and I think right there is where I'm going to leave it. So I didn't spill my coffee in here, and I'm not about to go and baste a turkey with this stuff, but this is the brake fluid. It looks like rusty, Gatorade-y water, something of another. It is absolutely disgusting. You can see there are like bits of rust and shit just sitting in there. An easy way to remove fluids is with the turkey baster. Very cheap and effective way to get fluids out of places and move them into other places. But anyway, we're going to get all this stuff out, top it off with clean brake fluid. I'm also going to come in here with a paper towel just to get any of the sludge out of the bottom of the master. And once the clean fluid is in there, we're going to go around and bleed the system with my homemade one-man brake bleeder. So when it comes to bleeding brakes, I feel like there's some confusion when it comes to what actually you can do in order to get the air out of the system. A one-man brake bleeder is a very, very quick and effective way to get not only the dirty fluid out of the system, but also the air, and to get that fresh fluid flushed fully through the master, all the lines, and to the caliper or wheel cylinder. So to make this, I just took a 1 liter bottle, made a hole in the cap, put some fluid in the bottom, and stuck a rubber hose in it. Now, with the hose submerged in the fluid and the bleeder cracked open, you could just pump on this thing all day, and you don't have to worry about sucking air through the system when you release the brake pedal. Normally, if you're bleeding brakes, you have somebody who's pumping it, and then you have somebody who's sitting there cracking the bleeder, then closing it before the person pumping it actually can lift their foot. So by using a one-man bleeder, you could just have this submersion fluid, and you could be pumping there all day, flush it as much as you want, and being the end of the hose is submerged in the brake fluid, when you actually release the pedal, it's just going to suck fluid back into the system instead of air. So with the brakes all bled, they don't work. Basically, I'm in here pressing the brake. You can kind of just hear the drag happening as I'm pressing it, and you can hear the shoes hitting the inside of the drums. The parking brake does work, because as I pull up on the brake here, you can see they stop, but the actual foot brake does pretty much jack shit. So the culprit to this problem is going to be the proportioning valve for any of you guys who might run into this. Now this block here has a valve inside of it, and depending on the difference in pressure on either side, being the brakes are split front and rear, if air is introduced into one side, the needle or the valve that's in there is going to move over depending on which side the pressure is on. That actually activates that switch that's on the block, and that's what turns the brake light on. I do have the brake light on, illuminated in the cluster, so I know that that valve is actually stuck, therefore not letting full pressure to the rear brakes. So I took another run down to AutoZone, grabbed some more brake fluid, that way we can get to the front, get the front wheels bled out, and then hit the backs one more time, and hopefully that's going to reset the proportioning valve and give us back brakes. So I got the entire brake system bled out. The fluid is looking great, but as you can see right here, the brakes just still aren't working in the back. So to fix this, I decided just to go for a ride and see how they stopped. Initially driving around, the braking was absolutely terrible. It still felt like the brake pedal was just hitting a wall and the fluid just wasn't moving to the back brakes. Fortunately though, after driving this way for just maybe an hour or so, the brakes completely came back. I think that proportioning valve finally freed up, moved back to where it was supposed to be, because then the brakes were working 100%. I mean, the back brakes were actually locking up before the fronts. That's how well it was stopping. So after completely rebuilding the rear brakes, this thing stops great. I mean, when I first got it, just jumping into this from either the Camaro or the Tahoe, the brakes would just feel so terrible in comparison. But I think the biggest problem was the fact that the wheel cylinder was leaking, so there may have been some air in the system, as well as just that proportioning valve being stuck, because ever since I got this thing, that brake light, that red light inside the cluster has been illuminated, and I think that was causing a lot of the problems. But now that things bled out, we got the new fluid, the new shoes in the back, no air in the system, and the proportioning valve working as it should, this thing stops like it's new. But with that being said, we still have to address the front brakes. We're either going to be doing a stock replacement, pads, rotors, wheel bearings, or we're going to upgrade to something a little bit bigger. I'm not 100% sure on that yet, but regardless, you guys will see it in an upcoming video. But as for what's next, we're going to be tackling the air conditioning system in this thing, getting the 33-year-old AC retrofitted to 134A, and working like it's supposed to. So that video is going to be out in a few weeks, guys. I am working on it right now. After that, we're going to be working on the T-tops. Then finally, this interior is getting one hell of a restoration. A lot of new parts going in, a lot of cleaning going on. I'm going to try to stick that all into one video. So if you guys want to see this thing come back to life, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, please leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next one.